I look forward to working with our partners throughout Arizona, and I'm really excited to create new opportunities for collaboration and innovation. I want to bring issues surrounding people with disabilities more to the forefront of conversations in all areas of life and continue the work of my predecessor, Erica McFadden, in ensuring that the voices of the disability community are heard. By the way, I want to mention those of us who work for the council are having some technical issues today. That's why we're not on camera. I apologize for that, but I hope you'll bear with us on that. Now, our foremost goal as the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Network is to help people with disabilities imagine and create a greater life. Today, we're starting on a journey, and we want you to join us. We want to impress upon society that people with disabilities are and can be a valuable part of the workforce. Secondly, we want to emphasize that there's not one path, but many paths an individual with disabilities can take. We hope to encourage people to eliminate the negative norms and stereotypes that society perpetuates around people with disabilities being employed, furthering their education, pursuing their career goals, or living independently in the community, and instead cultivate the notion that no idea and no ambition is a bad choice for people with disabilities. And we created a series of 6 webinars around the theme of creating a successful path to educate and inform Arizona stakeholders with an array of content experts to provide the context and the necessary components for a statewide system that provides and sustains competitive, integrated employment and helps to create meaningful careers for all Arizonans with developmental disabilities, regardless of complexity or the level of support they need. Before we begin the presentation, I want to take a moment to thank our Arizona Developmental Disabilities Network partners who've collaborated to make these webinars possible. Those partners include the Arizona chapter of the Association of People Supporting Employment First, or APSE, the Arizona Center for Disability Law, Arizona Employment First, Northern Arizona University's Institute for Human Development, the University of Arizona Sonoran Center for Excellence in Disabilities, and of course, the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. Today's webinar is entitled Imagining a Great Life, presented by 2 representatives from Raising Special Kids, Janna Murrell, Assistant Executive Director, and Ceci Hartke, Director of Programs. Janna became a volunteer with Raising Special Kids in 1998 after experiencing firsthand the value of parent-to-parent support when her son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. After working with families in the nonprofit arena for 12 years, Janna joined the staff at Raising Special Kids in 2008 and has worn several hats: family support specialist, director of family support and education, and now assistant executive director. Janna is a credentialed peer parent support partner and a BHT, certified trainer at the ASQ3 and ASQ SE, accredited provider of Level 4 Group Stepping Stones PPP, certified trainer for serving on groups that make decisions, and certified completion of the standards of quality for family strengthening and support. Ceci first reached out to Raising Special Kids in 2008 as a parent of a son newly diagnosed with autism. In 2017, she became a parent leader with Raising Special Kids with a real passion to help support other families with the same measured guidance that she had received when her family needed it most. In 2019, Ceci joined the Raising Special Kids team. She truly believes in the parent-to-parent model and is dedicated to helping families know they are not alone in their journey. Please note that we'll have a Q&A session after the presentation. And now, let's hear from Janna and Ceci.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for, first of all, for sharing the vision of this work. It was just presented so beautifully, and we're so delighted to be a part of this journey with all of you today. And as John so beautifully shared, that Ceci and I are really looking forward to having this. This is just a conversation. We're going to start out and hopefully lay a really nice foundation for the coming webinars that will be following this one today. So again, my name is Janna Murrell. I'm the Assistant Executive Director over at Raising Special Kids. And for those of you that are not familiar with Raising Special Kids, we are Arizona's federally designated parent training information center. We've been around for over 40 years. We're a nonprofit organization that serves parents that have children with any type of developmental disability. We're non-disability specific, and we serve the entire state of Arizona. And so delighted to be with you this morning. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ceci to introduce herself. And in the background, I'm going to work on sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Janna. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Ceci Hartke, again, Director of Programs with Raising Special Kids. I'm so happy to be here. As Janna said, this is a conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with you all. Aside from my title, the most important thing is I'm a mom. And my middle son, Roman, is what brought me to this work. I mentioned in the bio, he was originally diagnosed with pervasive development disorder and then later got the diagnosis of autism. And so he's a 16-year-old young man right now today, and we are working on imagining a great life for him. So I'm excited to share this training with you all. Great. So next slide, please, Janna. Okay, wonderful. So I wanted to talk about the agenda today. So this is what we'll be reviewing. What is a great life? Setting a vision, understanding expectations, the core component of a great life, how families can help in addressing concerns. Next slide. So today, despite having a disability, we can all have a great life, including jobs, recreation, independent living, further education. The disability often makes really little difference in the quality of life. So our world continues to change as well with technology. It's developed to support individuals with disability and provide more opportunities for growth and independence. Our hopes and dreams likely will evolve as our youth shift into adulthood. Next slide, please. So these pictures, what does a great life look like? There's a little bit of everything in these pictures, right? Looks like work, recreation. So oftentimes, what makes up a great life can be affected by limited exposure for our youth and young adults with disabilities. Families, we play a big role in that. We have a lot of decisions to make, and this can be difficult. We have to figure out how our youth and young adults can express what they want in their lives and use their voice. Next slide, please. What is important to have a vision? So as families or a professional working with young people, we are the consistency in the youth's lives. And so what we want to know, we sometimes know what's best for the youth and young adults, but sometimes we have to help them find their voice, which is a really important piece. This is where we approach person-centered planning. So person-centered planning is a theory that identifies each person has the capacity and desire to have personal growth, to change their opinion. It's about personal desires, personal dreams, and personal goals. So sometimes when we're looking at services, we have to reimagine a good life for our youth and young adults and shift when we're using services and supports. We always want to make sure that we're empowering our youth and we're not limiting them. But before we go on, there will be a couple of opportunities, and I heard all the rules, so we can put it into the chat. We want a little bit of feedback. We want this to be a conversation. So here's the first opportunity for you all to share. In thinking about these ideas, I'd like for you all to share an expectation that you might have for a youth or a young adult in your life or someone that you're working with. What are expectations we might have? I'm going to peek in the chat and see if anything pops up. To work in the community, great. Obtain competitive employment, best communication possible, financial empowerment, literacy, for them to live alone, attending school successfully. He will live independently one day. Levels of independence. Ooh, lots of ideas. Advocate for themselves. Wonderful. Adapt, use resources in the community. Absolutely. These are all really, really good expectations that we should have for our youth. And I'm so glad to see them. She will continue or contribute to society in a way that she chooses to use their skills, productive. Absolutely. Voting rights. Love it. Wonderful. These are great expectations. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Janna for the next slide.
Thanks, Ceci. I love hearing that, hearing you guys sharing these expectations. So how do we actually define expectations, and the expectation versus a high expectation? So we, sometimes we can catch ourselves limiting as parents. Sometimes we can protect ourselves and have a lower expectation. And so one thing that we're challenged with today is to think through a different lens and be able to think beyond just a regular expectation, but a high expectation. So let's talk about that for just a moment. An expectation is really the belief that someone will or should achieve something, that something will happen or is likely to happen in the future. That's just kind of like, yep, we know that this is going to happen. A high expectation is that belief that a person with a disability or another barrier can achieve the same life and have the same life choices as everyone else. And so one of the things that we've learned, especially working at Raising Special Kids, when we're talking with families, many, many times we hear a parent lower their expectation out of a sense of helping themselves cope or maybe not experience a disappointment. And one of the things that we really challenge them with is that, how is that different from an expectation or a high expectation that we have with our typically developing kids as well? And so challenging those parents to be able to think outside that and have the same high expectations for their kids that may have barriers as they have for their typically developing kids. And where do those low expectations come from? Well, sometimes it comes from the society that we live in, the society's perception about the impact of disability. Sometimes it's a generational perception. And I think that we see that many times. I know that in my family, for example, my grandparents, because of the generation that they come from, sometimes their perception of the impact of disability is very, very different from the perception of the impact of disability that we have within our own family, with our own family unit. And it's just it's far greater. It's that impact of the generational perception of the disability can really create a presumption upon the family to where it limits their expectation because of some of those messages that get telegraphed from the generational members of their family that they have high regard for. So that can be a real challenge for some families. Feelings about having a child with a disability. We see families move out of a place of grief and isolation into hope and expressing joy for the future. And that's really, really what we're talking about today. And then also what we're told by others. And that can be really, really influential in an individual's life. Those same types of messages we can, as parents, telegraph to our kids, our young adults, and then that limits them. So what we're challenging parents to think about is look at this through an entirely different lens. The secret is seeing that people with disabilities can do great things and not letting the other people's ideas impact your child's ability to make an amazing life for themselves. the importance of having high expectations is setting the bar high. Just really, I know that for me, whenever my son was very, very young, in the early years of us really learning about his disability and how it was going to impact his life, over time. And one of the things that I remember the most is hearing from a teacher that, it's going to be okay. As long as, you just as long as he's happy. And I remember thinking, no, that's not okay. And that's not enough. And I want him to be able to have an environment in school, and Ceci's going to talk about this a little bit more too, where he is equally challenged, by his teachers and his friends. And we are not going to be telegraphing that to him that, no, it's okay, you just get to skate by. No, you don't. You are going to have we're going to have the same level of expectation on you as we have for your typically developing sisters. We're going to use positive languages around him. We're using positive language with school and service providers. The beauty of that is it improves their confidence, and it also avoids restrictive programs. I'm going to share a story with you about my son and his younger sister. And one of the things that his younger sister really has always encouraged in their school setting was it drove her nuts if the friends around her brother treated him immaturely, or was talked down to him, or used baby talk, that sort of thing, or even talked louder as if he had a hearing impairment. And so that was something that just drove her nuts. She did not appreciate that one bit. And I'll never forget one time she shared with one of the students that was around them, was like, he's old enough to drive, so let's not talk to him like he's a baby. And so it's one of those things where, we have the opportunity to impact societal change by the way we behave and the way we help parents understand how important their role is in developing their young person's self-advocacy skills. And it comes from the way they talk, the way they model, and the way that their siblings do that. It starts there. It starts at home.
Thanks, Janna.
Ceci, is this me or you? This is you. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for that story, Janna, because that's kind of where we're going with this message. It starts at home. It just needs to start early. But I love this slide because it's an opportunity for everyone to share. And it always amazes me how we all are really feeling the same way about these two questions. So I would like to invite you all to type into the chat. The first one, what is your vision for a great life for your family member? And I'm guessing they're going to be similar to our expectations, but think about a great life. What would that look like? And I'll share mine because I think it's similar. I want my son to have people in his life. To me, that sounds like a great life. Have community outside of us, outside of his immediate family. Sense of purpose, independence, to feel independent. Integration in the community, yes. Some people might feel like stability, safety, relationships will be fulfilled. Great. Feeling like a valued person, safe home and community environment. Absolutely. These are all wonderful things that we should all have, right? Despite anything. So the other big question, which I think is sometimes what can limit us, is what is your biggest fear for your family? What do you not want for them? I think these are the things that sometimes will keep our youth and our young adult from flourishing, because we have fears, right? They're really legitimate fears. So if you can take a second and put some of those fears in there. I know that I'm fearful that someone will take advantage of my son. Isolation, that's real, absolutely. I don't want him to fail. Unhappy or alone. We'll treat him less than, absolutely. Limited, ongoing, and give to others. Perception of her, unhappy, absolutely. Isolation, depression. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. These are really, really important questions to ask ourselves, because we want to, I love what Janna shared about sort of thinking about if you have a typical person in your life, and sometimes making that comparison, loneliness, lack of connection. These are fears that we have for all youth and young adults, right? We're fearful of these things for everyone. Sometimes it feels a little bit more elevated with our young people that have disabilities, but these are very, very normal fears, and we want to be aware of them. We want to know what it is that we're afraid of so that we can navigate panic attacks, fear of being in the crowd. Those are so real among all, not just young people with disabilities. So next slide, please, Janna. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really hard and scary to be vulnerable like that. Okay, so the next slide. This is a really wonderful tool, and I believe we'll be sharing all of our resources a little later on, but this is a life trajectory, and it's very simple. You want to use this not only as a family, but include your youth and young adult, and we want to set up, what is a good life? What would that look like? Is this college? Is this living alone? Is this living with a roommate, a dream job, whatever that looks like, we want to put into that bubble. And then the bottom, we want to put all those fearful things, right? What do we want to avoid? What do we want to make sure is not something that our young person is experiencing? What's really nice about this is that while we're trajectorying into this, we can look at what are things and skills and resources that we can use to get to the life trajectory. There are resources, Raising Special Kids is one of them, Diversability Incorporated, VR, our schools. There's so many resources we could use. And then there'll be some like soft skills that we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's really important to do this early on so that you can see what are things that we want to work on. My sister-in-law has my nephew has autism as well, and he takes the bus to work. He's a 25-year-old young man, and she is just deathly fearful that he will get lost. And so some of the things that were put in place early on is he took a class to learn to maneuver the bus systems, and there was a lot of work that was poured into it. But these are sort of the kinds of things that if we can lay it out and understand what our goal is, what our fears are, where our strengths and weaknesses lie, we can work on it, we can progress. So this is a great tool to have. Next slide, please. So we're gonna talk about foundations of a great life, and it's broken up by foundation. So next slide, please, Janna. So these are the first 5. So it's education, employment, independent living, community connection, and personal choice. Next slide. So the first one we're starting with is education. So research continues to show that inclusion outcomes are best for both students with disabilities and also the general education population. We have to advocate for our children when it's appropriate. Let's think back to the exposure and how important it was to give our kids opportunities to thrive. Being in the general setting is important. Parents, we have to take a role in our child's IEP, in the transition goals as they get into high school. It's really important that we understand our role, that we understand the document, and that the goals are set really high for our child, and that their vision is also part of these goals. We want to always make sure that their voice is part of this. Next slide. So employment. Employment is one of those main focuses of our goal in life, right? Because what do you do for a living? Hi, how are you? What do you do? That's like the number one thing that we ask each other when we're in a social setting. Employment is such a big part of social events, meeting new people. It kind of becomes who we are. So it's important that we have some of these expectations, and that we have these conversations early with our youth and young adults. Working is just part of who they are, and it can look in so many ways. It could be part-time, it could be from home, in an office, out in the field, hands-on technology, and we are all capable of work in our lives. And again, like I said, it gives us purpose. So employment is a really important piece, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. Next one. Why should your family member work? So I want to just, there's obviously some bullet points here that you can read, but I want to open this up for another discussion. I want to ask you to put in the chat, why they should not work. Is there a reason why they should not work? Does anybody have any ideas on why it should be the opposite? No reason.
As we're thinking about that, yeah. Ceci, I was just thinking about, sometimes as we hear families express concern about that, well, their child, their young adult may not like their job, or they may feel uncomfortable, or they may fail, they may get fired. And, that's part of life, and that is part of them learning. And I know I've had jobs in my life that I did not like. And I learned by trying new things, what are the things I do like and I don't like. And that's the beauty of, really just having employment be part of a natural conversation, that the presumption will always just be that we will work.
Right. Absolutely. I know that that concept of failing forward, or failing with dignity, it's an important part of life, as Janna said. So some of these fears, some of these fears are very real, but they're fears that we have for everyone. It may not work out, but what is the term? You can never be good at something until you fail at that thing. And that's just a part of life. You want to attempt different things, and you want to have opportunities to realize, this is not for me. This does not work for me. I need to try something else. And that's how we find something. And the idea of having a purpose and a purpose and a reason to get up, and community, and, feeling like you're part of the community, and you're giving back, and you're receiving as well. It's a really important part. So I will read some of the bullets. Why it's important to work: socialization, self-worth, dignity, purpose, money, promotes mental health, and because they can. And that is true. I did see a couple of concerns, and there's always ways around it. And that's why it's important to have a team around you, and use resources, and ask questions, because oftentimes we need to look outside the box. And it can be really difficult for a parent when you're, in this box of life, in your own little world of four walls, when you start to ask for other people to pour in, because likely they're seeing things that you haven't been able to see. Okay, next slide. How families support employment. So families help build the expectation and skills of children throughout the years. Many of these skills are taught at home, daily living activities, and it's important to partner with professionals that work with our children or our youth and young adults. We may assume sometimes that systems of care are teaching these skills, and often they're not, and often they are. But by being a valid partner, we can work with the systems of corporate goals, work on specific skills and help our children find their vision. It's amazing because my young man, as I mentioned earlier, was 16 years old. His sister is only 18 months older. And so sometimes things that came really natural to my daughter didn't come so much for my son. And so you see that gap there, and there's opportunity as a family where we could fill that gap in, because we think, well, this is not something that you teach. It's something that's sort of innately in us, or they learn by watching their peers, and that's not always the case. And that's where we come in as a family. It's good to help making those, teaching those soft skills, the manners, the taking direction, the time management. And we have so much technology at our fingertips because even most of our youth walking around with an iPad or an iPhone. There's no reason why they can't have a timer on their phone when it's time for them to get ready to do a chore or school or a volunteer opportunity. Teaching real things. Again, sometimes it seems like it's not something that we should have to teach, but it is, and it's okay. And it's okay that it's not all coming from one place. We're all going to be filling in the gaps. We're all here to work together and see our young person holistically. And I'll share a personal story here. About a year and a half ago, my son had, he's not very social, and other than going to school and playing video games and having family life, he wasn't getting anything outside of the home. And I had decided that it would be really good for him to volunteer at church. And he is a piano player and he's got a wonderful ear. And I thought, well, maybe he can do the sound system. It would be a really good tool for him. But it took a lot of work on my part. And I was almost, I guess, at some point expecting for some of these things to happen naturally through some of the other resources that we use, some of the other agencies. And it didn't, for whatever reason. And I think it was right before COVID. I just thought it's time for me to do something. And it took a while. It took a phone call, an email, and 3 failed attempts where we showed up, and it didn't work out. And I was really nervous about it. I was worried that they would think he was a little odd and maybe not, see past some of the, the pacing and the not looking in the eye. And I did it. It took me a while, but we got him there. And here we are a year and a half later, and where he would get out of the car and pace back and forth for 2 or 3 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, but when you're sitting there and staring at 2 or 3 minutes of just pacing before they're off to their volunteer position, it hurt my heart, and I was nervous for him, but I knew it was good for him. Now he gets out of the car and he says, "Bye, Mom," and he's off. He has built some relationships. He feels a sense of belonging. They have increased some of the responsibility that they've given him. And these are the time management thing, which I don't think I could have ever done on my own, has sort of naturally happened because this is an important piece of his life, and he wants to not be late and he wants to be there. And as you all, well, if you all have teenagers, you know that teenagers aren't always as responsive to parents. So this is just a wonderful opportunity, and he's building soft skills. It's not quite employment yet, but it's just a really wonderful tool that kind of just organically happened, and I'm thankful for it. So I always encourage parents to think about opportunities like that for their young people. Next slide, Janna. So what is success? Thinking of a couple of things, what would not be, as mentioned before, we're not good at anything until we fail at it a couple times, right? Things that you would not be successful at first. You have to try, you have to participate. So I want this to be another opportunity for you to share in the chat. I want you to think about things that you're not successful at. What do you need help? And this could be for your young person, or this could be for yourself. My chat got a little behind. I'm not successful at cooking. Great. It can be difficult to ask for help. Yes. I'm not successful at meal planning. Yeah. Spreadsheet, math tasks. Yep. IT issues, yes, organizational skills, absolutely. I love this because this is just a real human piece, right? We are all not great at everything. I like to tease my husband. I pick on him. When I met him, he had not done his taxes for 3 years. And before we got married, I thought, holy moly, I do not want to marry someone who has not prepared their taxes. He's really good at waking up early and doing his job. And he's just he's the most incredible work ethic. But he was not good at paying his bills on time because it was just a second thought, or, submitting doing his tax return. Turned out he had money due to him, which is we always giggle about. That said, all of us are not good at everything, and we need supports, and we find people in our lives that support us, right? I mean, I'm thinking for those of us that are not good at cooking, hopefully you have someone at home, or a really great, neighborhood restaurant, or whatever that looks like. We all have supports. We don't all have to be wonderful at everything. Success looks different for everyone. Navigating pharmacy or follow up on referrals, absolutely. Thank you for your patience with my lovely puppy who's wanting to play. So wonderful. Thank you all for sharing all of those. So yes, the idea is that we all need supports in different capacities, and we need to remember that. So when we're thinking about supports for our young people with disabilities, that is true for every person. Next slide.
Thank you, Ceci. And I would love to add to that too, is it takes practice. And sometimes, if we are working on a specific skill set, just having the time, making the concerted effort to practice whenever we're not in a hurry. Those are also really, really, that's a great suggestion for our young people, especially if they're struggling with their confidence. Because if we're practicing when we're rushing, or when we're, right before we're getting ready to try to implement that new skill, and then the confidence level is just going to sink. So just having opportunities to take time to practice whenever we're not in a rush. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, Ceci just shared this beautiful story about her son and helping him get connected to a volunteer opportunity that was completely outside of the support of any kind of state system or state support system that so many of our families become very reliant on. And so the other goal of this learning journey with you today is to help parents understand that many times solutions, those are little sweet spots that we can help families find that are outside of our state's support systems that exist, that many of our family members are eligible for, that, peppering in those blue sky supports, that really, really come from a creative, out of the box solution that families try to come up with when they engage with the other members of the community that they're connected to. So I just didn't want us to lose that. Let's talk about a great life and independent living. What skills does your family member need to live independently or function in the community? A moment ago, we talked about a young man, Ceci was sharing about a young man that learned how to use public transportation. Y'all, public transportation is no joke. It is not easy to navigate public transportation. So I feel like if you can master public transportation, talk about some significant capacity there. Financial literacy, that's something that I wish my typically developing daughters had some extra support in learning how to manage finances, and healthy habits. This is about building in, self-compassion in our young people about how to care for themselves, how to have healthy eating habits, limiting screen time, balancing, what types of exercise they're getting, being outdoors, being part of nature, just really accessing the beautiful world that we live in. That may sound a little corny, but it's real, because I think that sometimes several of us mentioned earlier what were some of our fears, and they were isolation. And that's where, that helps us to think about, some of helping our young person develop healthy, just personal self-care habits for themselves. And then housing. This is really a big deal. I know that for my son, it's really important for him to choose his own friendships. And if he were living with someone, he would want to have a say in who he was living with. I mean, isn't that how it is for many of us? How frustrating it might be for an individual if they are, living, or there's a group home setting and maybe they don't like somebody that lives in their group home with them. And that can be really frustrating. We want to be able to have a choice of who we live with, who we are friends with, who we spend time with, and how we can help develop our young people's capacity to be able to say, I don't really want to do that, or help them, give them permission to say, no, I don't want to be friends with that person. That feels like a manufactured relationship. And that can be really empowering for our young people. Community connections. How will our family member be meaningfully connected to the community that they choose to live in? We want to help them connect to the people that they want in their lives. I kind of talked about that just a moment ago, and their opportunity to contribute to our society. What kinds of recreation and hobbies that are outside of some of the things that they feel that they're really naturally good at, we can find ourselves getting really, really hyper focused on it. So expanding outside of our comfort zone and trying new hobbies, trying a new sport, seeing a movie that we ordinarily wouldn't have chosen to see, going to a concert, and just being able to expand our ideas. And I know one of the things that we do at our house that my son loves is he has a whiteboard in his room that has a giant calendar on it, because he really likes to be able to look ahead and see what's coming up in the weeks ahead. When we may have an appointment, when we may have a get together planned or something like that. He also likes to notate on there things like, when is the season premiere of America's Got Talent, those types of things. But that gives him control over understanding what's coming next. And that helps him also feel connected to the community, because he may decide, hey, I know that this concert's going to come, and that's the day that it is. I have control over making the choice and expressing that I want to be able to go to that. It's just that what's a tool? What are the tools that we need to provide as much choice about living within our community? So personal choice, and we kind of talked about this a little bit more too, or a little bit ago, is your family member being given the opportunity? That's what I want to kind of camp on right there for a minute. Is our family member being given the opportunity to dictate the direction of their life? And maybe, sorry about that. And when we think about what are the different tools that we can use that our young person can use to have more of a voice, to have more of a say about those choices. And those might look like those self-directed IEPs, person-centered service plans. We know that the Division of Developmental Disabilities is implementing and is rolling out using this new person-centered planning document with DD members now. And how beautiful is that? Because it opens the conversation more about personal choice, likes and dislikes, and dreams for the future. This ability to take risks, to reach out to a person to see if they want to go to a movie with you, and that person may say no, but that's okay. Just allowing.
Excuse me, Janna, real quick. You
Yeah.
have about 5 minutes to be able to allow time for questions, okay?
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve, for the time check. And then sometimes their decisions don't always match our vision, and do the supports ever act as a barrier? So sometimes some of the support systems that exist might be actual barriers. So I want to be mindful of our time here, and I'm going to toss this over to Ceci.
So I will just let you guys take a peek at this. This is a really great tool for a vision statement. And there's a really cool link on how you can do this yourselves, but just taking a peek. This was done by a young man by the name of Andy. And if you can see, Andy used this to, gosh, I'm gonna have to squint a little bit. Things that he had, his strengths, social, determined, things that he might need a little bit help with, math, reading. He had a vision, and without looking, thank you so much. I get my own studio, wonderful. My job is taking pictures. I get a small house. I get married to Maggie. We don't know who Maggie is or if she ended up in the picture, but I work at Publix. It's really fun. I get to keep my money in the bank, and I want to go to college and live in a new house by myself, and my friends will come to my new house. So the only thing I want to stress about this is that Janna had mentioned how sometimes our youth's goals may not match ours. It's really important that we let them have that voice, because they need to have those opportunities to figure out what fits best for them. And for the sake of time, I will go to the next slide. We already discussed this a little bit, questions and concerns. We all have similar ideas. We don't want our youth to be alone or isolated or depressed or get taken advantage of. But there are things that we can think about to put in place to help us feel better about that. And then the next slide, Janna, you want to take balancing act?
Yes. And you know what, y'all, it is a balancing act, isn't it? It's balancing, trying to maintain safety for an individual that's vulnerable and is at risk for exploitation, but yet also just trying to give them as many opportunities to be successful and to have, and also to experience failures, learn from them, clean up the skin knee, and move forward. It's truly a balancing act, and it takes constant adjusting. And I liken it to whenever you're trying to, this is a beautiful visual symbol of the difficulty of the balancing act, but it's also focusing. And when you're looking through a lens and you're trying to focus, it's just like that with our young people. You're continually, right when you're in focus, something else is going to change. We're going to have to refocus and adjust again. So we understand that. And then also having that mindset kind of helps us move forward to be successful.
And this next slide is a nice long pathway. So we're keepers of vision. It takes time. We have to give ourselves grace and our youth grace. And sometimes their vision is hard to believe. And sometimes our youth and young adults need a longer runway. And so we need to be okay with that. And I'll just share a quick story. My young man wants to live in a dorm, go to college. His school, he struggles a little bit in school. He's going to be a junior, and he wants to do 2 choir classes because he loves choir, but doesn't realize he's got to squeeze in language in order to do a 4-year college. And so we talked a little bit about community college. And it's funny because my daughter, who's going off to a 4-year college, says, Mom, well, that's just not, he needs to go to a 4-year college and he needs to do. And I said, no, it's okay. His runway is going to look a little bit different. So we all need to keep that in mind and be cognizant. There's no one way. Our lives are, they're zigzag. We're going to get to our destination the way we're going to get there. And it's okay. And we need to give ourselves grace. So next slide. We made it. These are our takeaways.
So
sorry, go ahead, Janna.
No, go ahead. Okay. So, it's so true. The world has predetermined milestones for humans, and this is going to look different from others. It's going to be difficult, but we want to be able to offer you and offer parents tools and resources that are available, and also remind families that you're not doing this alone, that we all are in this together, because this is the community we live in. And one of the dreams I heard, I feel like I remember seeing in the chat earlier was, that our community that we live in, the world we live in, is a more inclusive and accepting community for individuals with disabilities. And I think that's where we want to land today, setting a vision for a great life for our young people, putting your family in that position to be the leader of that with support. And having questions and concerns is completely normal. We all agreed on that. And that success looks different for everyone. And celebrating the small steps, because that continues to propel us forward. So with that, I think we are at time, and we wanted to open it up for any questions or discussion. And I will defer to one of our other hosts to kind of help us with managing that. Do we have any questions or?
We have a comment. So from Nicole, the challenge for me as a mom is our daughter uses a communication device she's amazing with, but we are limited in what we can ask. So trying to find that balance of giving her choices and making decisions for her. It may just be a trial and error thing, but if anyone has suggestions, this is an area I'm always seeking advice on.
That's a great question, Nicole. And you're absolutely right. We get limited with with some of the tools that were provided, right? So that's great. I'm going to advance our slide to some of the resources too that we're here to offer. And obviously, Nicole, we can chat more too, but she is sending her question to the masses. I think we're accompanied by a lot of amazing professionals on this call today too, that might be able to speak to that as well. So on behalf of Raising Special Kids, thank you so very much for this time that we can spend together. And Ceci, would you like to adjourn for us?
Yes, thank you so much. We will be sharing all these resources, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Raising Special Kids. We are happy to help. We are all parents of children with disabilities, and we've been there. So it is a true peer-to-peer conversation. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ceci and Janna, on behalf of the Developmental Disabilities Network in Arizona. Thank you for taking time to be with us today, for all of the information you've presented. And for those who are interested, I want to give another individual a chance to speak just briefly here. For those who aren't familiar with APSE, the Association of People Supporting Employment First, I want to introduce Lori Sandonay to talk a little bit about that and encourage all of you who might be interested to pursue membership in APSE. Lori, are you there?
There we go. So
okay, well, we'll follow.
It gave me a warning that I couldn't unmute myself, but hi, everybody. My name is Lori Sandonay, and I'm with the Arizona Association for People Supporting Employment First. That's a long name for we just want people to work. And I put in the chat, our website. We'd love for you to check it out and join us if you can. We're all volunteers working, most of us professionals working to encourage systems change and families and schools and people with disabilities, that employment is a great first option for people. So thank you. And you can check out the website. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And again, thanks to all of you who've joined us today. I apologize again for the technical difficulties. I don't have in front of me when our next session is, but perhaps someone else on the call could chime in with that. I just want to say on behalf of the Developmental Disabilities Network, the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, and all those who have put their time and effort into creating this panel series, thank you very much. We appreciate your interest and your participation.